Welcome to the Guru and the Good Dude podcast, where tell the real life stories behind the businesses in your local neighborhood. Today, we talk to Robert Hernandez, owner of Urban Uniforms, about how he stumbled into a multi-million-dollar business outfitting school children with uniforms.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Guru and the Good Dude. Welcome back. It's been a couple weeks since we actually had a guest on, and I'm super excited. The guest that I have today is a local business owner, been in the game for quite some time, many decades, and his name is Robert Hernandez. He runs Urban Uniform, and we met at a cigar bar, so we have a mutual respect and love for a nice cigar and whiskey and pool as well, huh?
Yeah, I learned that the other day, for sure.
Yeah, we both like to play pool. So the way I like to start this off, Robert, like I said, this is a podcast about business, but it's also about life. And I ask people to start their story wherever they want to.
Okay.
And I know when we met, you started your story kind of right before you launched your business, but go back as far as you want. Tell us about your background and how you got into what you do.
Yeah, great, man. Well, thanks for having me. That's definitely cool. Looking forward to it. It's my first, actually. So I've been in the business since 1999. Way it started was I hopped around like most people when they're young, right? You try to figure out. Yeah, so currently right now what we do is we're a decorator, apparel decorator. But it all started off in school uniforms, which I own two companies technically. One is called the Schoolyard Store, and the other is called Urban Uniforms. So if we retrace back about 3 decades ago, back around 95 or so, I was working in the mortgage industry, and that was quite interesting. You know, I learned a lot about that part of it. And
were you doing loan origination?
No, actually, I was processing mortgage payments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, payment process.
Yeah, so I was in that department, and I moved my way up a little bit. I started off on this big encoder, so as all the mortgage payments were coming in.
Wait, these were by check then?
Yeah, back then. Yeah, I'm kind of old,
Wow.
Yeah. We received a lot of mail on a daily basis. I actually picked up the mail, brought it over. I was the first one there, about 6 a.m, and we had this large encoding machine, and we had to sort them all out, and then I would process them. So you had to be pretty fast with your hands. Back in the day, that's the way we did things.
Yeah.
So anyway, I moved up a little bit in there, and I was married, I was young, I had a child, and I knew, like in the corporate world, not always, but you kind of plateau at a certain point,
Yeah.
There's people there that just aren't going to move.
Yeah.
And so if you want that spot, you got to wait.
Yeah.
So
before I got into real estate, similar, not to jump in, but I was at Medtronic, and entry-level job, but it required like a bachelor's degree. It was a sales position, and they promise you upward mobility once you get in.
Yeah.
It's the big thing, upward mobility. We hire from within. Well, a year into the job, I saw nobody was getting promoted. There were people, one rank above me had been there 7 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you guys are wasting away. I can't believe you're even surviving on $36,000 a year at 30 years old or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the promise of corporate upward mobility is a lie. I mean, for the most part.
Yeah.
So few spots. But you're right. Somebody's got to die. Somebody's got to leave.
Absolutely.
And then that pool they pull from is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a gamble.
Yeah, I didn't think my chances were good. So like everybody else, we want to live the American dream. I had a young child. I was married, and I didn't have much college education. I had 3 years community college, and didn't really amount to anything. I thought I was going to be a CPA. Kind of glad it didn't turn out that way, because I've got 2 CPAs, one for each company, and I don't think I'd want to be stuck behind a desk these days. Anyhow, fast forward, the Express News. Okay, there's the old Express News. Back then, that was where everybody got their information. You're looking for a job, go to the classifieds, right?
Mm-hmm. So that was Twitter of the day.
That's it.
Every day.
So I answered an ad And big and bold, it was like this big event for Morgan Stanley, Dean Witter. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm in the mortgage industry. I like numbers. There's got to be something. There was something interesting about that ad that just kind of brought me closer to, maybe I should go, right? So one thing you got to know about me, unfortunately, is that, and I proved that to you today. I was late, about 3 minutes.
You were a couple minutes late, yeah.
Unfortunately, that's probably my worst bad habit I have. It doesn't matter. I'd probably be meeting with the president and probably still be late. Doesn't matter. It's just I can't seem
consistent.
I consistent in that area. So anyhow, but I do communicate well. Hey, I'm running late.
Yeah,
I got that text in right before I got
did.
here. Anyway, so fast forward, I show up at this event. It's downtown. And I'm fairly young. I'm in my early 20s, and I walk in and there's 300-400 people there. Everybody's got suits and they all look like they had college degrees, and I'm kind of like, all right, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I end up there, and, they have this speaker, and they're talking about the life of a broker. You're going to get to meet these wealthy people. They're going to be your clients. They're going to invite you to these parties and, this and that and the other. And I'm thinking, man, this sounds like fun, right? I had done a little bit of homework about what that would be, but had no experience. So, they start speaking, and all of a sudden they say, hey, they start passing out this pamphlet. Hey, we're going to give you all a little test. We just kind of want to get a feel for our audience, if you will. And so then I end up, we all go to this thing, and I do quite well, actually. It seemed like the questions were almost like math problems,
Mm-hmm.
Solving these math problems. Although math wasn't my strength, but I had a lot of common sense with the basics, if you will, right? You know what word problems are.
Yeah.
A little bit of that, a little bit of a few other things. So moving forward, I left there and I get a call a couple of days later. Hey, Rob, congratulations. You did well. We'd like to invite you back. And so that led to a series of different tests. And I'm getting excited, like, wow, I'm starting to learn about who Morgan Stanley is, how big of a deal this could be, and an opportunity for myself. And so the strangest test that I ended up taking was they stuck me in this room. They said, here you go. They stuck this pamphlet on my desk, and they said, you're going to get a call in 5 minutes. So you got to read this out real quick, and there's a phone there. And said, all right. So I started kind of browsing through the paperwork, and it looks like we were going to be doing a role play. There was going to be somebody on the other line calling and pretending they wanted to invest with Morgan Stanley.
Mm-hmm.
And my job was basically just to role play with them and do the best that I could based on whatever questions they may have. Well, what I didn't mention was during my years before this, I worked for a company called West Telemarketing. Great company to work for. They had structure.
They've been around a long time.
Yeah. They taught you how to sell, and it was ours was outbound. Inbound, outbound? It was outbound. We'd get the calls, or we'd make the calls. Can't remember. One of those two. Actually, I worked in both departments. I sold Sears Siding. I sold AT&T. But what they do is prior to is they teach you how to sell, how to mirror the customer, how to engage with them, when to speak, when not to speak. If you know your product, you can be quite successful all over the phone. So that was one of the important things that it had really a lot to do with that phone call. Because here I'm getting a phone call from somebody, and I'm role-playing, and I was quite successful at West Telemarketing doing that, right? So anyway, I get the call, and I felt like I nailed it. I ended up getting hired there. So that was a good thing, So at this point now, I show up my first day, right? I'm thrilled as hell. I'm thinking, man, I made it. This was really something that I needed in my life. And so I show up and there's no one there but myself. And I'm thinking, man, I remember there being 300 or 400 people. Like, I'm thinking they hired 30 of us. Who knows, right? So I asked the question, hey, where's everybody else at? Oh, no, sir, you're the only one we hired.
Wow.
I said, you're kidding. No. You mean all those people that were there, I am the guy that you hired? Oh, yes, sir. I said, wow. I was just blown away by that. I'm thinking, geez,
Man.
Well,
let me interject because it's relatable to me because when I mentioned I worked at Medtronic, and one of the things that I learned there was phone sales, and they were incredible. And a lot of the people that wound up working were actually from West Telemarketing.
Oh, okay.
And they would get hired on full time, or they were like temps, and then they would move from West. And the people who were there, actually the sales director had been the sales director at West.
Mm-hmm.
And the skills they taught were incredible. Right?
Yeah.
And the best thing, like you just mentioned, it's adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
If you can learn phone sales or internet sales or car sales or in-person sales, you can adapt that to anything, as long as, even a technical product, as long as you know the process, right?
Absolutely.
And so building rapport, asking the right questions, objection handling, getting to the close, it's the same whether you're selling Sears siding or you're selling multi-million-dollar commercial properties or stock or brokerage.
Yeah,
stocks.
it's all relative, no question.
I want to point out, one of the reasons, or the reason you probably got hired, was that experience. I bet the other 299 people in that building hadn't worked for West Telemarketing.
Yeah.
They had gone the traditional financial route. So they maybe they knew math better, or maybe they knew underwriting better, or how to evaluate the P&E of the stock. But you had skills, hard skills that they wanted.
And maybe that was, I would say that had a lot to do with it. And I'll tell you, let me finish that. So before I got hired, Rick Bechet, he was the vice president at the Morgan Stanley here in town. So I had to go through an interview process. So after all the testing, they put me in an office with Rick. And so he interviews me, and he asks several questions. And the one thing I'll never forget, he said, he goes, geez, I've interviewed a lot of people. You interview very well, like one of the best interviews I've ever had. And so, I thought, wow, great, thanks, appreciate that. Didn't think much of it, but, I just felt like this was my calling. I felt that this was, this is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So, good old mom and dad, they're proud of us, right? They're proud of their children. So my mom was bragging to everybody. She didn't know what she was bragging about. She didn't even know what a financial investor was, any of that good stuff. But at the end of the day, my mijo, this is Hispanic, right, I'm so proud of him. He's working for, she was always bragging about me. I said, Mom, calm down. I haven't, I'm just studying for my Series 7 license at this point. They're paying me. So my checks are coming from the World Trade Center.
Damn.
Who would have known years later, after everything that we know about the World Trade Center. So I stumbled across the check, and I'll get back to the story. Sometime thereafter, I never really paid attention to where my checks were coming from. Who does that, right? Well, I've got a stub that says a World Trade Center. And so what they were doing is they were paying me to study to get my Series 7 license. But this interview with Rick, after he had said that, I just felt really good about it. And I was kicking ass. Hope I could say that.
Yeah.
Just doing well, going through all these tests. And the one thing that I knew is that my mother's side of the family, they were all homegrown entrepreneurs. They were very successful. And I spent a lot of my childhood there, at my grandmother's and my aunts and so forth. And I noticed my dad's side was all blue collar, completely different life. My mother's side was a little bit more on a wealthy side. And so I even had a few stints with some of my aunts in the home health care agency, did a few things.
Sure.
But so I had this what I believed was this entrepreneur spirit in me. So I had a friend while I'm studying at Dean Witter, doing well, almost done with my Series 7 license. He approaches me and says, "Hey, Rob, I got this great opportunity. Man, I think you should look into it. I have a lady. He's an orthopedic tech in Houston, right? And he assists in surgery. Apparently, one of their clients, some child, was getting his knee done, and he got into conversation with his mother, and his mother had a manufacturing distribution company out of Houston making scrubs, manufacturing scrubs. So she was looking for a distributor for the San Antonio market and South Texas market. And I said, man, I'm doing good, Edgar. I've got this new job. I'm doing well. He goes, all right, well, it's a good opportunity. Medical scrubs are a big part of the economy, all over the place, and predominantly San Antonio. Got a lot of good business in the medical industry here. As I said, I was in the home health care agency helping my aunts, and so I'm used to seeing scrubs and things of that nature. So I have a brother who was at the time selling hair products, and I knew he wasn't happy. He wasn't a very good salesman. I love you, Mark, but bottom line is he's kind of quiet, right?
Okay.
But he's got this long, nice hair, and all
He
he
didn't
had
have
to, he
to
was
sell.
good. He was good looking, so he'd walk into these hair salons, and his face and his hair sold the product.
They just
right?
go, what are you using?
And so, I said, hey, Mark, I got this opportunity. Edgar called. We both know Edgar. But I'm thinking about him, right? I've got my thing going on. And I said, we should go to Houston and just take a look to see what's up with this lady. Let's go to her little manufacturing plant. And he said she had this whole setup. So I arranged to take my brother. We went to Houston, and we met with this lady, and she had this really nice little factory, had all these Filipina ladies, making scrubs, special, nice quality. I mean, it didn't take long for me to figure out that this is a good opportunity. So my brother and I left, and I said, Mark, this is something you should maybe give it a shot. He goes, man, I can't do this. I said, Mark, you got to give it a shot, dude. This is a big deal here. Could lead to a lot of business. He goes, well, I'm not going to do it unless you do it. I think, man, I've got something going on. So I thought long and hard. Took me a couple of weeks for me to figure it out. So what I decided was to leave my Morgan Stanley Dean Witter position.
Wow.
To start my new venture as an entrepreneur, selling medical scrubs. And so I had it. The hardest part about all this was for me to have to go to Rick and tell him after several weeks and all the intense, that led up to this, the interviews and so forth, for me to have to tell him, hey, listen, thank you, but I'm moving a different direction.
Wow.
That was a very hard decision.
What was it about Morgan Stanley or about that job that ultimately didn't win out over the opportunity to work for yourself?
That's a good question. And I'll tell you, I've never really admitted this, but I think fear more than anything. And I'll tell you why. It's not that I didn't feel confident in the position. I knew I would have been successful at one point or another. But what I realized, it's a sales job, right? I didn't come from a whole lot of money, personally. I didn't know anybody with a lot of money besides my aunts. There's about 3 or 4 of them. They weren't going to hand you much. The name would sell itself. But what I did notice as I was there, they had a few people in this office. They were cold calling. And it just didn't seem like it was always a lot of no's, a lot of rejections. We know that. We were in telemarketing,
Yeah.
right? But this was a whole different level. I weighed out, where would I feel more comfortable? Controlling my own destiny as an entrepreneur, selling scrubs, maybe getting into retail, brick and mortar, my own comfort level. Over here, you've got people depending on you. You've got to perform. The pressure, I felt, would be much more extreme. So
is there also a little bit of imposter syndrome? Like you mentioned, not growing up around money, and you're literally selling money products.
Yeah,
you're selling. Put your money into this and it'll make you more money. I should know because I have so much of it, right?
Exactly.
There's a bit of imposter syndrome behind
Yeah,
that.
I mean, if you really think about it, maybe I hadn't really thought about it at that level, but the fear of being able to, having to compete with somebody who comes from that background, who may have family members that already, maybe at that point I just didn't feel like I would be as successful as maybe others would be because they come from that history, that background. But in hindsight, I if I'd given myself an opportunity, really, I think I would have done well.
Yeah.
I probably would have ended up in New York somewhere.
Yeah.
Probably just really, just going for it. But I didn't. So what Rick tells me is when I go in there and I tell him what I'm doing, he says, "Rob, I'm a bit shocked. I'm surprised, but I respect your decision. No one's ever really done this. But I'll tell you what, if things don't work out, which I do hope that they do, you'll always have a job here.
That's nice.
I'm going to keep my doors open for you."
Nice.
And, I never forgot that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Needless to say, I never did go back. But so what happened is, so I left that. Everybody thought I was crazy. My girlfriend at the time, which was now my wife of 29 years, or we've been together for 29 years. She was my girlfriend then. She said, "Rob, that's a big mistake. You need to really reconsider." But I didn't. So, but I, honestly, I don't know. I kind of felt like I did this for my brother. He may not believe that, but I've always felt. And my brother's a very smart guy. He's a man of few words. My mentor once said that silence is golden.
Yeah.
And he is the epitome of that. He speaks, and when he does, you listen. Had I listened to him in the 25 plus years that we've been in business, I'd be filthy, filthy rich. That was my downfall later, and I'll explain that to you. But Mark is a man of few words, but when he does speak, he's got a lot to say, and it's usually a lot of wisdom. He's a year and a half older than me, but a very, very smart guy.
That's a lot of respect there, man.
Yeah, no, and he deserves every bit of it. So what we did was we rented out this 200 square foot little building, right? Little office. It was an industrial park, and back then you had a fax machine. And so what I knew I had to do was she sent us all these samples of all the product, and we made phone calls. We did cold calling, and we knocked on every door. I did. Mark kind of sat behind there and let me do all the work. Hey, what do you need me to do? That type of thing, right? And so what we would do is we would set up appointments with all these medical facilities, a dental office, anybody that wore scrubs. I was knocking on their door. And if they were interested, which most of them were, they would allow us to set up maybe during their lunch hour in their break rooms or something, and I'd take orders, just write them down and fax them over, fill the orders, and we did that for about a year. We did quite well. But
let me ask you something real quick. So, because you mentioned pressure being something that you were maybe potentially trying to avoid at Morgan Stanley, but realistically, you put yourself in a situation that's much higher pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
It's do or die. You said you just got married, you just had a kid, you start a business in an industry you're not familiar with. That's pressure.
100%. There's at Morgan Stanley, you had structure. If you followed that, they had the product. It was bulletproof. It's all up to you. Over here, I didn't know a lick about business. Didn't have any clue about anything other than just basic common sense, right? But yeah, ultimately, what I've learned is running a business is not easy. A lot of trial and error. But if the only way I can tell you is that if you're not failing, then there's no way you'll ever know what it's like to succeed. You've got to go through those pitfalls, a little roller coaster ride, right? But we were very fortunate. Let me finish this exciting story. It was crazy. It's an amazing story. Even I have to say this. So here we are, first year. We're knocking on doors. We're doing well, and then we get a phone call from our father. And he says, "Hey, guys, how are things going?" "Oh, we're good, Dad. Just here in the office." I remember getting that phone call. And he says, hey, did you hear about the San Antonio Independent School District, which is one of the largest school districts in San Antonio? They're thinking about converting over to public school uniforms. And I thought about you all because you all are doing uniforms. You're doing scrubs. I get it. But you guys should check into that. And one thing about my father, he's always looking after his children. So I said, yeah, that's interesting, Dad. Maybe we'll give him a call. So then I end up, of course, myself, Mark. Mark's not that guy to make those phone calls, but if he had to, I'm sure he would have. So he gets the best candidate to do it, and who's that? Me. Is Rob. Give him a call. Find out what's going on. So I called the San Antonio Independent School District, and I inquired about what we had heard, right? And so they said, oh, yeah, let me get someone to speak to you. So Dr. David Splitek, he was a superintendent back then in 98, 99. So they get him on the phone. And I'm like, okay, how are you, sir? And so what I asked him was, I hear that y'all are thinking about going into uniforms. Is there anything that I can do to help you? He goes, well, actually, yes. We're trying to convince the parents of the district to convert over to uniforms, and it seems like we're having a little bit of opposition. But we'd like to do a fashion show. We think that may help. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe we can help you. So what we agreed to do was to do a fashion show at Irving Middle School. It's one of the middle schools in the district. And so the questions I asked him, well, how many children? What kind of apparel are you looking for? He said, well, we want to dress about 35 kids. And we don't know who. We just know they're going to be arranged from this to this. And what we want is maybe khaki, navy bottoms, a variety of pants, shorts, whatever it is you can offer. We'd like to dress them up and do a show. We're going to invite all the parents of the district. Whoever shows up, it's going to be in this auditorium. So while we were selling scrubs, there was a brand called Cherokee Uniforms, and Cherokee Uniforms is a division of Strategic Partners. And while we were in the scrub business, we were selling our own brand, the brand that I told you we were representing. Well, when you go to these medical facilities, they wanted other brands as well. Dickies, Peaches, just all these other brands. So we had resources at that point. So one of them was Cherokee Uniforms, and I had noticed that they had another division called Classroom Uniforms. And so when I looked into it, by coincidence, a company that we were already doing business with had a division that made and manufactured school uniforms. Mm-hmm. So I made the phone call, ended up speaking to a guy named Bill Bosch, and said, hey, listen, I'm in San Antonio. I do business with your other division, Cherokee, and the scrubs. And, tell me about your school uniform line. He goes, yeah, we kind of launched recently, but it's a great product. And I said, well, listen, we've got to dress 70,000 kids possibly. If we can convince, if the district can convince the parents for their children to be in school uniforms, there's about 90-something schools, 70,000 kids, and they want to do this immediately. We're towards the latter part of the school year. We've only got a couple of months to make this decision, and if it works, we have the summer to get these children in uniforms. He goes, well, what can I do to help you? I said, well, I got to dress 35 kids. I don't know what grade, and it was just a variety of children. I have no idea. He goes, well, tell you what, let me get you some samples. So I got tons of boxes shipped over to me. Didn't know up to that day what we were up against, but we had enough product to get all 30-plus kids in uniforms. The news was there. It was a big deal. Like, they even had the news there. They even got me on the news. They came out speaking about this stuff. It was crazy. It was wild. So about 2 weeks later, they approved it. I get a call from the superintendent, and he says, Mr. Hernandez, congratulations. We're moving forward. I hope you're ready. And I'm like, oh, great, awesome. Remember, we're selling scrubs.
Right.
That's as far as we are with this, So he says, can you dress, can you make this happen? And I'm like, yeah. I'm thinking, man, this is a lot of work. We literally have no time.
Let's do some math really quick. You said 70,000 kids. It's going to be mandated they all wear the same-ish uniform.
Elementary, middle school, and high school. Yeah.
How many uniforms? I didn't go to a school that had uniforms. How many sets does each kid usually buy?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on whether you can afford to buy, uh, you know, one for every day. You had some families that came in that just bought a couple of sets.
Sure.
And then you had some that bought for like 2 weeks. They didn't want to wash clothes,
Well, let's say on average 5, right?
Yeah.
So 70,000 kids, 350,000 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, uniforms.
Sets, yeah.
That's 700,000 garments.
Yeah.
Because top and bottom.
Yeah.
Okay. And what was the average price?
Back then we were selling polos for about between $8 and $12, and pants ranged from $20 to $22.
Let's call an average set
about $30
bucks.
About $30 a set. Yeah,
it's like $10 million.
Well, it was a good amount of business. Now,
potential.
Yeah, potential business. Let's clear that. So what happened is when he said that, I had like maybe $10,000. Back then, that was a decent amount of change, right? I guess. Liquid, besides a few assets here and there. We figured, okay, how are we going to accomplish this? Now we've got the school district depending on us as not the sole supplier, but he's talking like we're depending on you to make this happen. So what we did was, my mother had this house. Unfortunately, my parents had recently divorced. And so she had this house. And so we asked her, Mom, we need some help. We figured we need to open at least 2 retail stores, and we need to do it like quick. Meanwhile, we had gone to the SBA. We went to Jefferson Bank and applied for an SBA loan. But that was like a 60-day process. It was a lot of work. But we still did. We did what we had to do. So we had that, which we were waiting. And then we thought, well, we can't wait that long. We got to make a move quick. We've got to get these stores together. So my mother allowed us to borrow against her home. Back then, it was quite easy to do it. So we got a home equity loan against her home. It was all paid for. So there was a good amount of equity on it.
Real estate to the rescue.
Yeah. So she trusted in her children, thank God. And I think what we ended up borrowing was like $60,000. So I took the money that we were able to get from my mom's home and the little money that I had, and then we managed to get in our possession a map of the entire school district. You got a lot of kids, a lot of schools. We want to see where these schools are at. Nothing better than an aerial view of a map, right?
Sure.
So we saw this map had all the schools laid out. So what we thought strategically is we're going to look at this map and figure out where the cluster of schools are, and then we're going to pinpoint where we think we may want to put a store, a brick and mortar. So we did. So now we located the area that we want to concentrate in. So now let's drive over there. Let's try to find something in the area. And so we did. We managed to find 2 locations. I managed to get them in a contract. Within about less than a month after signing the lease, getting the building situated, we had our first grand opening June 2nd, our second one like June 9th or so, like a week apart. We had managed to negotiate with our suppliers, not just classrooms, there was a couple of other suppliers, a credit line. With the little bit of money that we had, we had to put some skin into the game. So they gave us these lines of credits. Luckily, our credit was good. And so we were off and running. We hired some employees. But the reality is when it came down to selling these uniforms and it was time, we had lines and lines and lines of people outside our stores. We were not prepared for the amount of business we got. We couldn't get everybody in this store. We had to put somebody at the front door and let people in little at a time. Remember, this was the first year. Nothing had ever been done like this in the city of San Antonio. So we actually were so busy that we had lines of people. We had families that were kind enough to help us. Like, hey, let me roll up my sleeves. Let me help you here. This is insane. This is madness. There were probably a few other people maybe trying to do. We were the first small local company, but there was a couple of department stores that, you can find a khaki navy pant almost everywhere.
Sure.
But they weren't prepared for that. You know what I mean? They just, if they knew what was about to happen, corporate level takes a while, right?
Yeah.
So that first year, they just weren't prepared for this type of movement. I made so much money, I didn't know how long it took to count cash.
Yeah.
Wow. It was like, wow, it takes this long to count money. Usually you got a little bundle in your hand and it takes just a couple seconds, right? No, there was stacks of cash rolling everywhere. I couldn't even count. I was so tired at the end of the day. I just put the money in the bags. Because back then, a lot of people in the locations we were at, a lot of people paid cash.
Yeah.
Few checks and some bounced. Back then, it's like we didn't have a way to verify that. We just take their ID. But, hey, okay, so you take their ID, and if it's no good, it's no good. So now you're chasing them. It was just a handful of those. It wasn't such a big deal. But anyway, we did almost $2 million in sales over the summer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that the most sales you've ever done?
Yes, and I'll tell you why. We're talking 1999.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that equals up to these days.
Probably double, if not more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was an insane amount of business. It was a day in. Morning till morning. At the end, after everything was done, you'd have to front the stores, restock the stores. We had layaway programs. We were learning as we go. The software was amazing. We were very lucky to have found somebody who was able to help us with the software. But it was a long, drawn-out process just trying to get this thing going. But it was insane madness. And in the school uniform industry, in the state of Texas, when they mandate school uniforms, what we learned, which we didn't know going into this, that you have to provide some type of assistance, right? So shortly after the summer was over and we made all this mad money, we get a call from the district saying, hey, listen, we have this uniform program and we'd like for you to partake in it. And what it is every child receives a free top and bottom. And I'm like, okay, great. What would you like us to do? She goes, well, we'd like to send the children over to your store. You size them up. They walk away with the uniform and you bill us. I said, okay. So they, when you tell somebody, hey, you're allowed to receive a free top and bottom, all you got to do is just apply for it.
Yeah.
Imagine the amount of people that applied, right?
Oh, sure.
So we had hundreds, thousands of kids that applied for this, parents did. And so then they'd give us this huge booklets, and it was this form that they had to fill out, and it was a child's name, the parent's name, and if that parent happened to have 3 children, elementary, middle school, and high school, here you go. Here's your information. We'd verify. They'd come in. We'd outfit them. We'd bill the district. Imagine that amount of business coming in. All we gave them was 10%. It was like literally almost retail, just a 10% discount to the school. So that kept us busy quite a bit as well. And so after 2 or 3 years, corporate world gets in. Sears, JCPenney's, Mervyn's, you name it. Everybody was into this.
Yeah, they want a piece.
The Edgewood Independent School District also followed suit. Some of the Northside Independent School Districts, the Northeast. It was...
So it became a huge opportunity.
Yes, it was. And so we were doing business with Northside, Northeast. We actually opened up a 3rd location on the north side of town, right across Holmes High School. Mm-hmm. And what a lot of these schools would do, in the north side predominantly, they would ask us, hey, Robert, can you come during orientation and set up shop? So while we're busy during the summer, I've got to set up a crew, load up all these uniforms, and drive to the school and set up and try to make some sales there as well. Mm-hmm. So we did that, and one time I actually scheduled 3 in one day.
Oh, boy.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
Plus, we had to keep our stores open. But guess what? I managed.
Yeah.
I didn't back out. So talk about no sleep, talk about madness, talk about opportunity. It was, it was great. It was just mind-boggling, the amount of business that we had. So we did well. And what we realized while in the school uniform business, that you start building relationships with these schools, and they start asking questions. Hey, do you do embroidery? Do you do screen printing? And so, let's face it, it's a seasonal business.
Sure.
You're busy for a short period, you make all this money, and it kind of tapers down a little bit. But what we started doing was building relationships with schools, doing embroidery and screen printing. And so we ended up, buying all our equipment. We had a production facility. So as we also sold school uniforms, we decorated apparel. We worked with schools. It led to other relationships with businesses. So we did that for 13 years. And by that time, our numbers had dwindled, because now you can go to J.C. Penney's. They've got credit cards, these families.
Yeah.
They didn't have to depend on just us. Although we had a loyal following, we had second generation coming to us.
Wow.
Like, hey, I remember when my mom used to bring me here when I was a kid. Now they're married and they have a child. So it was sad, but we did that all the way, I think, to 2011, 2013. And what we did is we concentrated on urban uniforms. We created urban uniforms, even though technically it kind of started back in 99. But Urban Uniforms really is just an exclusive apparel decorator, and we provide embroidery and screen printing to anybody.
Well, before we move on into the story, I want to point something out, because there's dozens of people, dozens of people that I know that are looking for an opportunity to start a business, to build something.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people wind up pursuing things out of, let's call it passion, or I work I do a lot of bar and restaurant stuff, and a lot of people want to get into these businesses, and they're very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And we see them close very quickly. What I want to point out is that you probably, you didn't really know much about school uniforms before it became an opportunity, but you saw an opportunity,
mm-hmm.
and then you executed that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is that they look for the thing that they want to do and then try to find the opportunity.
Yeah.
You saw the opportunity, and then you just figured out how to deliver all the parts.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is an amazing entrepreneurial side, and it sounds like you kept doing that throughout your career.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to ask what, of course your back was against the wall when you started your new business, or we're always looking for new kind of ways in. But what do you attribute that to, that you just kind of jumped in with both feet and then said, I'll figure out the rest afterwards?
Well, that's definitely what had to happen. I wouldn't suggest, doing that, these days. I think everyone has to, when it comes to business, you've got to do your due diligence. You got to really thoroughly look at whatever it is that you're interested in, and do as much homework as you can. I find you'd find more success that way, as opposed to just sort of, let me get in it and then figure it out later.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in this case, I had to do that. I was forced to do it, but I was blessed, because I knew this was going to win. This was going to be a win. They were depending on me to provide the service. It wasn't like I was, hey, let me get in the uniform business and see if I can convince a district to go into uniforms.
Yeah.
No, it was actually just the opposite. But yes, I was very fortunate to been able to be put in that position. And by doing that, I knew that the responsibility was great, that they were really depending on my resources to get these people into uniform. So I felt like there was no way I was going to give myself that opportunity to fail.
Yeah.
So it was a 24-hour, day in, day out, asking questions, learning as much as I could as we went. I didn't have a choice, but I knew that I could not fail. It doesn't take an Einstein to really have to figure this out, depending on the complexity of the business venture you're getting into. We're not talking anything really difficult. You're selling product, retail. Yeah. It's not that hard. But, if someone said, hey, Rob, I'm interested in starting a company. I want to open up a boutique store. Hold on a minute. Mm-hmm. Let's take a minute and let's talk about this. Have you ever walked into a boutique store and seen a lot of people in there and walk out with a bag? No. Not the best idea. So, I think it's really a matter of just studying whatever it is that you might be interested in and trying to figure out what your chances are. I mean, there's a lot of questions you need to ask yourself, and you got to have a checklist. And if those boxes check off, then then your chances may be better.
Sure. Well, and being in business for as long as you have to continue to do things right. But I think it's important to talk about time, like the challenges we talked about at the beginning. You came in and said that it was a long day or it was a rough day, which a lot of days in business are like that. Mm-hmm. They're just rewarding still, Mm-hmm. But I want to hear, over the course of your career as an entrepreneur, like what are some of the things you would have done differently?
Oh, geez, man. That'd take a whole day to figure out.
Well, you mentioned your brother. I think specifically you said, man, if I had listened to my brother at this point or that point, I probably would have made 10x. But I'm curious what those kind of things, when you look back, it's really interesting to think on, if I had made this choice or that choice, and how do you fix that moving forward?
Yeah. Well, I didn't come to this interview to fabricate anything. Sure. If you want truth, I'm going to give you truth. Okay. When you're not, it's like comparing to somebody who won the lottery, right? Do you remember when I said I had about 10,000 to my name, mm-hmm. and then just a few months after that, I generated $2 million, almost $2 million in sales.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money to go through. Now, naturally, the first thing you got to do is you got to pay your vendors, you got to pay your bills, and then what's left? Well, what was left was a good amount. I had to hire an accountant, didn't realize how much money the IRS takes from you.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there was still a good amount of money. And this repeated itself for a little bit, right? So here we are. We take a trip to Miami. First example of what not to do. So after that year settles down, we're looking into labeling our product, doing a few things, getting things done, a little bit, trying to increase our margins, if you will. So we started manufacturing our own product out of Peru. We had our own label. We met a guy named Wally. He approached us and said that, would we be interested in making our own polos? And I said, well, what do you have in mind? And so what we ended up doing was we hired this guy. Peruvian cotton is some of the best cotton in the world, okay? And he said that he could make us the best polo for a darn good price compared to what we're paying, and that he could promise to have it to us before the next school year. So I said, okay. So there's a jersey net polo, there's a piqué polo. Those are specific fabrics that we needed to sell. Back then, the dry fit wasn't available. No one was doing that back then. And so, we're dealing with all these public schools, and each public school has a different color: royal blue, navy, burgundy, maroon, black, white, gold, light blue. So we had to carry all these colors. These are the tops, the basic colored tops that we had to carry. So I manufactured out of Peru my own brand with my own label, my name on the buttons, my name on the tag, and it's the best polo ever. I still have samples. I got to show you that. It's really a cool product. So, things get a little, you can take things to a different level when it comes to the uniforms, but we were manufacturing some of that and just got into other things. So, the profit margins were getting better. And so there was a guy named Eddie Barea in Miami. Going back to why I'm telling you the story is, some of the things that I learned the hard way, right?
Sure.
So we end up going to Miami. There's a company called Ibley Uniforms, Ibley, I think. The owner was Eddie Barea. What happened back over there in Miami that also happened in California was these large school districts started doing that, because what happens is you have these children in the public sector, kids, just dressing like crap, right? Or, a little too revealing. So the admin has to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we're going to keep this kid in compliance with their uniform. And so they spend more time regulating that than educating them, right? This is where the public school uniforms. So the problem was huge in California, was huge in Florida. So this guy got into the business, but instead of him depending on distributors to get his product from, he manufactured all his product. And so when I searched him, he invited me over. The guy had 17 stores around Florida.
Wow.
He manufactured all his product with his label and did the same thing I did. He had brick and mortar stores, but he had 16, 17 locations and manufactured everything. So the guy took it to another level. So we end up over there in Florida, and I take my brother, of course, and a friend of ours. And so we're staying at the Fontainebleau Hotel, right? Yeah, it's a pretty upscale hotel.
Yeah.
We end up over there, and there's a place called Maurice's Antiques. They're, down there somewhere in the hotel. So I walk in, and I'm looking around like, wow, there's some pretty cool stuff here. I had an American Express, right? I don't know, maybe no limit. It seemed that way because every time I pulled it out, it was good, right? So I end up over there, and I saw these pictures that just caught my eye. Like, wow, those are cool. The thing that I didn't do is I didn't question how much they were. I just said I wanted it. So I buy them. They're huge, big canvases. At least one of them was much larger than the other. So when the bill came out, it was like $6,000. And that's a lot of money back then, right?
Yeah.
For 2 pictures. And so I'm like, okay, I got to get this back to San Antonio. So I had them pack it up, ship it, paid. It gets shipped over there. We're still in Miami. And my wife, once the product, the packages come in, we're already back in San Antonio. She goes, what is this? And I said, I bought some pictures there. And I still have them. My brother has one, and I have the other still to this day. And, so she questions, wow, these are beautiful. What did you pay for them? And when I told her, my wife came from a very humble background, right?
Sure.
She says, that's insane. Why would you spend that kind of money? Well, I don't know. I just thought it'd be something cool to have, right? So I guess the lesson in that was, I think I was spending on average $17,000 to $20,000 a month on American Express on stuff I had nothing to show for. It was just all, I wasn't building any assets with that. You know what I mean? Instead of putting that into real estate and instead of doing something, we were reinvesting into our companies for sure. But the lessons learned is that I thought the money would never end.
Yeah.
So the money kept coming in for a short period, and I kept spending it as I made it. You asked me what I would do differently. It's you've got to understand the value of money.
Yeah.
Easy come, easy go, but you actually have full control of how you can manage that.
Well, man, I mean, when you start making that kind of money and it does kind of feel like that, like, oh, well, if I put this effort in, then this is what I get out. If I do this, I make more money, or big checks get cashed. And it almost always feels like, well, I got to do something to reward myself, right? Well, you're rewarding your future, you're rewarding your current self, but you're not really thinking about your future self.
Yeah.
Right? Like the real reward is to have an asset that continues to pay you back so you don't have to keep working your ass off.
100. Yeah.
But it's a hard lesson to learn, and I think everybody who's made money goes through that.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it myself, like buy the thing. It's like, oh, it's just a little blip in the checking account. But the reality is when things aren't going as well as they were before, and you look back and you go,
looking back,
damn, why do I have all this stuff that I don't want, or like that doesn't really hold that value for me anymore, versus the assets, versus the savings account, or that comfort.
That was the lesson. I think what my problem was is that I was always trying to please the people in my life, and my brother was one of them. My children, my wife, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think we work hard, that we should all be entitled. But my brother didn't handle any of the money. He left it all up to me. And the one thing that I found him always telling me is, had he handled the books, we could have done better.
Yeah.
He's my older brother. He's going to tell me what he feels
Sure.
and how he feels. But he lives in the past more than the present. And I said, Mark, that's yesterday. We got to keep moving.
Nothing you can do about it.
All we do is we learn and we keep moving forward. And that's what I'm good at. So I've recorrected. I changed things. But had I really listened to him, I think we could have done things a little differently. And I would say, to give him credit, maybe we would have been further along than we are today.
Sure.
But
well, it's not a race. It's an endless game, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things too that you've highlighted is that a lot of times in entrepreneurship, when we have success and we think that it's going to stay this way, we lose some of the competitive edge that got us to where we were, right? Where we get complacent, we get comfortable.
Absolutely.
We go, oh, well, we're always going to make 2 million or 3 million. That's good enough. And that's okay. It really is okay to be comfortable with what you have, and not to adjust your lifestyle up too crazy or set goals to have. There's stupid guys on Instagram now that are like, I want to be the first trillionaire. And the reality is, like, why? Why does it matter? What are you going to do with $1 trillion? Like, if you're not happy with $1,000 in the bank account, you're not going to be happy with $1 trillion in the bank account, right?
Tip, yeah.
So the real thing, though, the real charm or the real appeal of entrepreneurship or owning your own business is the drive, the fire, the hunt, the thing that got you that opportunity that you took advantage of right away and you crushed it. Mm-hmm. When you stop looking for that, then you start to lose that kind of like spirit. Mm-hmm. And again, it's all cyclical. Like, life is cyclical, but business is just as much, where like at any point, if you are on the opposite end of that spectrum where you're like pushing too hard because you don't have enough, get complacent because you have everything you want, it goes back and forth.
Yeah.
The real key, like for anybody out there who starts a business, is long-term thinking and gradual, consistent growth.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. I can't say any better than you, Timothy. You're doing a great job at this. I tell you, everything you just described is 100% the truth. What happened with us? We had no choice. We had a school district that was now depending on our success to get these kids in uniforms, and so we managed. We got that. So the lessons in business have been really learn as you go. And when you know you've made a mistake, it's what you do to correct it and how you move forward in business, right? And I really wouldn't change much other than just managing my money better.
Sure.
And taking all this money and putting it into some type of asset, reinvesting long terms. Not to say I'm not there today, but I'm wondering, had I started back then, how much more would I have?
Yeah.
But, in the middle of the 13 years that we were in the retail side, and I turned around and shut that division down and concentrated on this embroidery and screen printing company and realized how much of an opportunity that is.
Sure.
And that's a year, day in, day out, year in business. So the very first year after I shut down my uniform business, I turned that embroidery and screen printing business that I was doing on a part-time basis, because we were running the retail side, which was about roughly maybe $200,000 or $300,000 in embroidery and screen printing, in addition to the school uniforms. One year to the next, I took it to $2.5 million.
Wow.
In embroidery and screen printing. I grew the company from just 3 or 4 people to 25 people.
Wow.
We opened up an 8,000 square foot shop, and I just pieced it all together. And I'm like, yes, we had salespeople. We were going out there. They were getting the business. It was incredible. A lot of work. So what happened is I learned from the school uniform business what I needed to do to take my company, my second venture, if you will, to another level and do things a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
You learn from all of this. And so we're still currently doing that. We've learned also from fast growth that sometimes that's not as important, right? I'll add, in the midst of our success, my wife had developed cancer, breast cancer, and I'm the key. I'm the focal, I guess, the main ingredient to the company, right? And when you're not there, you leave it to employees, and it doesn't always fare well. So I spent a good amount of time away from the office trying to make sure my wife was okay. And in the midst of that, we lost a couple of big accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to restructure, reorganize, and it turned out to be well. My wife's cancer-free. As we've evolved, we realized that you don't have to be that big. You can literally scale down and still make the same amount of money or more. You just you surround yourself with world-class people, great partners, and you let them do what they do best.
Yeah.
Instead of you taking it all on yourself. And so that's how I've learned as I've experienced this personally and restructured and not fear what can happen, you know?
There's a great book out there called Build to Sell, and it's a book about building a business in a way that is sellable down the road as your exit strategy. So starting a business with your exit in mind, even if you don't plan to sell the business 5, 10, 15 years from now, whatever, building it in a way that's systematic. And you touched on something that's a big part of it, which is by a lot of people when they start a business, let's say they start a printing business, they're like, we do shirts, we do mugs, we do pins, we do hats, we do posters, they have the whole gambit, right? They've got a catalog of products. So they've got 50 different SKUs or 100 different SKUs, and they have no idea what their profit margin is on each one, but they'll take the order as it comes in. And instead, the right way to do it is by taking a look at the most profitable parts of the business and focusing on selling those. What's the thing that you can do the fastest, the easiest, the best,
Absolutely.
better than anybody else?
Scaling down a bit. That's exactly.
Take some SKUs off the plate, right? And then go, okay, could I make the same amount or more from these products and get rid of X number of employees, X number of machines, amount of square footage, but just be really efficient at it. And the thing is, in that book, by specializing in something, you do both. You scale your revenue, you decrease your overhead, and you have a business that's super sellable because maybe you're so specialized you're the only one that can do this, or maybe you've developed such a tight book of business that those people are more profitable with you. So I think, you're learning it through doing it, and it's amazing. Textbooks are written in the same things that you're saying.
Yeah, I did not actually, I've never really been big on reading, to be honest with you. My son has, and he's quite successful in his own way. But I've learned a lot from him. But unfortunately, through trial and error has been my way. That's really the only way that I've ever learned is by trying it. But I think I have to say that I've been quite lucky that I've managed in the last 25 years to stay in business through the mortgage crisis, through COVID, through, just various, occurrences in my life. I'm still here. I'm stronger. We actually bounced back into the school uniform business. Earlier you had asked, or we had talked about a couple of companies that I owned, and one of them is called the Schoolyard. So while we were in the now apparel decorating business, I had an opportunity to buy a school uniform company. But what this school uniform company did is it actually catered to private schools, whole different animal. So I ended up buying this business. So I got back into the school uniform business, and as soon as I bought it, COVID happened.
Oh man!
So that was a tough one there. I'd laid down all this money. Purchased this company, and we ended up having to kind of shut down temporarily. So glad that that's all behind us, and we're just now kind of getting comfortable and getting a Schoolyard to the level that it could. It's a very, very profitable venture, we believe, and it's just a matter of time. You just got to get out there. There's tons of private schools out there that need our services. Very little competition. So now I've got my hands fully in. So between the urban uniforms and the Schoolyard and investing in other things and just doing a few things with the money that I'm making now, I'm making up for some lost time.
Yeah.
I feel really good. I think it's important that every day I'm blessed. I wake up in the morning with a lot of energy, and I try to focus on business. At the same time, relax a little bit. Love smoking cigars, enjoying my life, and I'm in a good place right now. I think there really isn't much that I would change at the moment. I've learned a lot. Don't repeat the same mistakes again. It's quite simple. You know what I mean? It isn't that difficult. If you have a passion for something, do your homework, ask a few questions. If you feel comfortable with it, then go with it. You'll never know.
Man,
You try it.
I don't think we could leave it any better than that. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think a lot of people shy away from sometimes sharing the good and the bad and the ugly, and to be honest, it's super relatable. Everybody who's in the business or wants to get into a business or left a business, it's out there, and it's good, it's bad. The people that learn, stay resilient, and keep using the things that worked, take a more scientific approach to it, they tend to be more successful in the long run.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. Thank you very much. And I hope whoever has the privy to listen to this conversation, I think Timothy's got a good head on his shoulders. Everything he said, actually, I couldn't have said it better myself. So happy to be part of this, man.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks for listening to The Guru and The Good Dude. Tune in next week for another episode. Y'all have a good one.